What happens when country music royalty collides with daytime television drama and everything spirals completely out of control? Well, buckle up because this story is going to leave you stunned. Before we dive into what happened, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a comment because you're definitely going to want to talk about this one. The morning began just like any other at the Today with Jenna and Friends studio. The stage lights were shining bright, the cameras were rolling smoothly, and the live audience buzzed with anticipation. Reba McEntire, the queen of country music herself, was scheduled to appear for what everyone thought would be a standard promotional chat. She was expected to talk about her new album, share updates about her tour, and maybe throw in a few heartfelt stories from her long career in the spotlight. Jenna, the energetic host, had her note cards ready with her usual blend of warm questions and light banter. She'd done this routine countless times with hundreds of celebrities, and nothing about this morning seemed unusual. Producers had prepped her with details on Reba's recent projects, her charity work, and a couple of fun personal tidbits that would charm the audience. It was supposed to be one of those cheerful, easygoing interviews that viewers could sip their coffee to. But as it turns out, television sometimes takes a sharp left turn you never see coming. When Reba walked onto the set, she looked every inch the superstar she's always been. She wore a sharp burgundy blazer, her iconic red hair styled to perfection, and that famous smile lighting up her face. The audience erupted with cheers and applause, thrilled to see one of their favorite performers live and in person. Jenna rose from her chair with her arms open, ready for the welcoming hug that always begins the show's interviews. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the incomparable Reba McEntire," Jenna announced with that bright, polished enthusiasm daytime hosts are known for. The two women exchanged a quick embrace before settling into their seats, sharing small pleasantries that the microphones didn't quite pick up. "Reba, it's such a privilege to have you here today," Jenna said with a practiced smile as she glanced at her cards. "You look absolutely stunning, and I know our viewers can't wait to hear what you've been working on." Reba smiled warmly, adjusting herself in the plush chair. "Well, thank you for having me, Jenna. It's always wonderful to be here and get to connect with the fans." The first part of the interview went exactly as expected. They discussed Reba's latest album, her inspiration behind the new songs, and how she felt about the way country music has evolved. Reba was graceful, witty, and full of engaging stories, just like she'd been in hundreds of interviews before. The crowd listened closely, laughing at her jokes, clapping at the right moments, and clearly enjoying every word. Then Jenna leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice as if she were about to share something juicy. "Now, I just have to ask," she said. "You've been in this industry for what, over 40 years now? You must have witnessed incredible changes, not only in music but also in the way women are treated in entertainment." Reba nodded thoughtfully. "Oh, absolutely. When I started, the landscape was very different. Women had to fight twice as hard just to get half the credit. That's just the plain truth. But I've always believed in standing up for what matters and not backing down." "That's exactly where I wanted to go with this," Jenna replied, and her tone made Reba tilt her head ever so slightly. Lately, there have been some conversations about older artists, especially women, and whether they should gracefully step aside to make room for younger talent. "I'm curious what you think about that." The room seemed to go still. Reba's famous smile faltered just a bit, becoming more careful, more measured. "That's an interesting way to put it, Jenna. Are you asking me if I think I should retire?" "Not exactly retire," Jenna said quickly, though there was something in her persistence that suggested she wasn't letting go. "But don't you think there's something to be said about knowing when your time has passed?" "You're 68 years old. At what point does hanging onto the spotlight become more about ego than artistry?" That question landed like a punch. Reba straightened in her chair, her posture sharp, her smile turning icy. "I'm sorry, did you just suggest that my career at this point is about ego?" Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable steel edge. Jenna gave a half smile, clearly realizing she'd struck a nerve but pushing forward anyway. "I'm just saying maybe there's a discussion to be had about making room for the next generation. Younger artists are struggling for airplay and recognition. When established stars like you dominate the charts, it can make it harder for new voices. Fresh voices, Reba repeated, but now her tone had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by razor-sharp resolve. Let me make one thing clear, Jenna. I have earned every single bit of my success. Decades of hard work, dedication, and talent put me where I am. Not luck, not favors. And I won't be stepping aside because someone thinks I've reached some imaginary expiration date. The tension in the room was suddenly thick. Producers shifted nervously behind the cameras, clearly sensing that things were veering wildly off script. But Jenna, perhaps thinking she was creating must-see TV, pressed harder. But surely you can see how your generation of artists has been on top for such a long time. Isn't it a little selfish to keep occupying that space instead of giving others a chance? Reba's eyes flashed with unmistakable fury. She leaned forward, her voice dropping into a dangerous quiet. Selfish? Did you really just call me selfish for continuing to do the work I love and giving fans the music they still ask for? I'm just asking the tough questions, Jenna insisted, though her confidence was clearly cracking. Your last album didn't exactly light up the charts. Maybe the market is trying to tell you something? That was the breaking point. Reba's face hardened into stillness. My last album debuted at number 4 on the Billboard Country chart and number 13 on the Billboard 200. It went gold in 6 months. But clearly you didn't bother to do your research before deciding to ambush me on live television. The audience, who had been shifting uncomfortably, now began to murmur loudly. They knew they were witnessing something very different from the usual morning show fluff. Marcus, Jenna's co-host, tried to intervene. Ladies, maybe we could steer this back to talking about Reba's upcoming tour. I'm sure the fans would love to hear about that. But Reba wasn't about to let it slide. No, Marcus. Jenna seems determined to share her strong opinions about my career. Let's hear them all. Jenna, pale but stubborn, kept going. Look, I'm not trying to be unkind. But maybe there comes a time when experience should give way to fresh energy. The industry is changing. Younger artists know the streaming world better. Reba's southern accent grew thicker, a clear warning sign. Fresh energy? Honey, I was shaking up this industry when half those so-called fresh artists were still crawling in diapers. I fought for creative control, broke barriers for women, and built a brand that's lasted across generations. That's fresh energy. By now, the audience was torn between gasps and applause. Some clapped loudly, others sat stunned. Phones were coming out, recording what they knew was a historic live TV moment. And another thing, Reba continued, her voice stronger now. This idea that I should step aside gracefully? That's sexism and ageism wrapped into one. Would you ever ask a male country star if he should quit to make room for someone younger? No, you wouldn't. Jenna tried to interrupt, but Reba cut her off cold. Don't even try to spin it. You invited me here under the guise of promoting my work, and instead you've spent this entire segment suggesting I'm too old and irrelevant. Well, let me set the record straight. My tour dates for next year sold out, every last one. My streaming numbers are climbing every quarter. My fan base spans from teenagers who found me on TikTok to grandparents who've loved me since the 80s. So no, Jenna, I'm not out of touch. I'm more relevant than ever. The studio audience erupted in applause. People shouted things like, "We love you, Reba!" The tide had fully turned. Jenna looked shaken. Marcus tried again to step in, but Reba raised her hand, silencing him. No, Marcus. Jenna has said enough, and I've heard enough. She began unclipping her mic. Everyone in the studio froze, realizing what was coming. Jenna stammered, "Reba, please. I think this has been a misunderstanding. I respect you." A misunderstanding? Reba snapped. No, sweetheart. You've made your feelings very clear. The silence that followed was deafening. Reba stood, holding her mic in her hand, glaring down at Jenna with a mixture of disappointment and fire. The audience could feel they were witnessing history unfold. You know what the real problem is here? Reba continued. You didn't prepare. You didn't bother to learn about my recent work, my ongoing success, or my relevance today. And worst of all, you didn't show me the respect I've earned. Jenna's face drained of color. Reba, I truly apologize. That wasn't my intention. Your intention, Reba repeated with disbelief. Your intention was to embarrass me in front of millions, to paint me as a has-been. Well, congratulations, you've succeeded, the audience shouted in support. The studio energy was firmly with Reba now. Marcus made one last attempt. Maybe we can start over, Reba. Fresh slate? Reba softened toward him briefly. Marcus, I know you mean well, but there's no starting over. Some things once said can't be unsaid. She turned back to Jenna, who sat trembling. You want to talk about Grace? Let me show you real Grace. I'm not going to sit here, smile, and pretend this is fine. I know when I'm being set up, and I'm too seasoned to play along. Reba placed her mic down firmly on the coffee table. The click echoed across the silent studio. She picked up her purse, and the room held its breath. Facing the audience, she smiled. Thank you for your kindness and support. I'm sorry you had to witness this. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, many standing. Reba, please don't leave like this, Jenna begged. Reba paused at the edge of the stage. Her voice was steady and final. Jenna, some things can't be fixed with a commercial break or a half-hearted apology. I've spent 43 years building a career on respect, work ethic, and dignity. Never in all those years have I walked off a set until today. But I've also never been disrespected like this. She looked out at the cameras. Fresh voices earn their place through talent, not by tearing down the women who paved the way. Remember that. With that, Reba turned, her heels clicking against the floor as she exited. The sound echoed like a drumbeat in the stunned silence. The cameras kept rolling on Jenna's shocked expression and Marcus's helpless glance. Producers behind the scenes gestured frantically, trying to salvage the chaos. Just before disappearing behind the studio doors, Reba stopped and spoke one final line without turning back. For the record, my next album drops in 6 months. My tour starts in 8 weeks. Every single show is already sold out. So much for being irrelevant. The door closed firmly behind her, and the room sat in stunned silence. Jenna remained frozen in her chair, microphone clipped to her jacket, staring at the empty seat beside her. The silence stretched until Marcus finally muttered, "We'll be right back after this break." But everyone knew no commercial could erase what had just gone down. Reba McEntire had just pulled off one of the most powerful, unforgettable walk-offs in live television history. And she'd done it with the kind of fire, grace, and strength that proved exactly why she's remained a force for more than 4 decades. So what do you think? Was Reba right to walk away? Or should she have stayed and handled it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.